Kevin, and this is the Bible Artist Podcast. I'm glad to be joined by my friend and co-host Victor, and we are going to continue discussing Amazon's House of David series. We've gone through all the episodes up to this point, and we will be discussing episode 6 today. We'll be going through different storylines and sharing our reactions, analyzing kind of what's going on in the show. And I have a few interesting sidebars for today that I'd really like to get into. Things about like the Book of Enoch, about how the show is using kind of myth and weaving in kind of myth, but scripture also. I've got some stuff about Tolkien and how the show is drawing on the Lord of the Rings films. There's also some AI things that we'll be discussing related to that opening sequence. So lots of different interesting topics related to episode 6 that I'd love to dive into. By the way, if you are new to the Bible Artist, I've got a website, thebibleartist.com, lots of different in-depth recaps and reviews and analysis of both House of David and The Chosen, and just a lot of thought on kind of biblical adaptation and stuff like that. And if you'd like to support my work, I have a Buy Me a Coffee account where you can provide either one-time or ongoing contributions and get a little bit of additional content in kind of recognition of that. But yeah, before we get into things, Victor, do you want to just share kind of what was your kind of big picture impression of episode 6 before we get into the nitty gritty?
I thought it was a great setup episode. It's kind of like, we're coming to the finish line of this season where we're going to return to the big battle between David and Goliath. So this is getting all the pieces on the board, getting all the emotions and the conflicts lined up so that these next 2 episodes hit pretty good. And I thought it was a very masterfully crafted episode of accomplishing those goals.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. I thought in terms of kind of the way that they took a lot of the different storylines that they've been weaving throughout the season and kind of brought things to a head and wove things together in a very kind of dramatic fashion. I thought it was really impressive in that regard and did a great job of kind of setting us, letting us know this is where we're heading. So even if we hadn't gotten the little introduction at the beginning of season 1, we would know now, like, okay, we're heading towards a big conflict, heading towards that climactic battle between David and Goliath. So I agree with you. Overall, strong episode, even if it's not like maybe, like one of the biggest episodes in terms of all the events, although there were some pretty big events. So we'll be diving into some of that stuff in just a second. So episode 6 starts out with a sequence where we see angels falling from the sky. We hear Orpah, Goliath's mother, the mother of the giants. She's kind of recounting this tale of how Shemyaza was leading the Watchers, a subset of angels or spirits. The Genesis sometimes calls them the sons of God. He was leading them in rebellion, and they end up cast out on the earth. And there they kind of, she put it as like, got an unnatural desire for breeding with human women. And so, we see a kind of a picture of this studly looking angel guy coming up towards this human woman who's just kind of randomly walking through the middle of rainy, rocky area, and they embrace. And then we hear about how the giants, the Nephilim or Anakim, arose after that. And it turns out that this is Orpah kind of recounting these things to Goliath and his brothers, and she kind of uses this as a way of kind of reminding them that they're meant to be gods, kind of like their parents, which are looked at as gods or minor spirits or whatever. So lots of different things to discuss related to the sequence, but I think we'll start with. Before we get into kind of the substance of it, let's talk a little bit about kind of the style of it or the mechanism for doing this sequence, because there was an article in Variety this weekend where John Irwin, he discusses how they used some different AI tools like Midjourney and a few other ones that I can't remember them all off the top of my head in order to construct this sequence. And yeah, that definitely kind of struck me as I was watching. I wasn't 100% sure if it was AI or maybe just traditional CGI or like some sort of mixture. But yeah, watching it again, it definitely kind of has some of those hallmarks of AI. Some people pointed out that there appear to be some kind of dissimilarities with the same figure kind of in different sequences, having slightly different features and things like that. And so, yeah, Victor, I know you have thoughts about the use of AI on this, so I'm curious to hear.
Well, it wasn't until you posted one of your early videos that you pointed out the article from Variety, and I was like, I didn't pick up on it immediately that it was AI. You know, looking at it now, it's obviously AI. I just kind of first thought, wow, the show's really leveled up in their special effects budget, because it's an impressive looking sequence.
Yeah.
You know, that looks beyond any of the kind of effects that the show's done so far. But you know, as far as the AI of it, I'm just going to go up front. I wouldn't say I'm pro AI, but I'm not anti AI.
Yeah.
For my career, for my job, I have a video production company. So AI is one of the things that is kind of coming for my job. You know, that's one of the things that we see coming, because the more these tools are created, it's going to put me out of work, or it's going to put aspects of things that I do out of work. And to me, a lot of the AI controversies that people say that it's taking jobs away from people that would normally have that. Well, like for in this case, in this show, they just wouldn't have had a sequence like this in the show if they had to pay for it traditionally. It would have cost them the same budget for probably what their entire show was just to do this one sequence. So it's not like any jobs, and the people that made this, they was using their own artwork, their own stuff that they created to then feed that into the AI to create this stuff. So I don't feel there's any controversy about the production of it and the usage of it. Now, I kind of agree with, like, you know, from shot to shot, the characters don't match. So I just think that this technology isn't here yet. I mean, if this is if a show that's going to be done on Amazon, this is as good as it can get. To me, it's still not good enough, except for like a dreamy sort of you know, fantasy fairy tale-ish kind of sequence like we had, where these kind of visuals and the weirdness of it kind of fits. But like, I know there's probably the controversy of it's probably going to continue. I just feel like it's a non-issue, because, you know, they use their own work, their own artwork to create it. It's people in their special effects department created it. No jobs were taken away or lost because they decided to use AI tools to do this.
Yeah, I heard, or I saw someone in my comments when I did that little mini video about the AI use. They accused the team of being like lazy or something, and I feel like that's like totally the opposite. Like, if they were lazy, they just would have kind of skipped the sequence and not gone for the more ambitious thing. I think that they actually were you know, taking a step by trying to do this. So I applaud them for like making an attempt to do something that was kind of beyond their budget range. Because realistically, doing CGI for a sequence like this, like you said, it could have cost them like millions of dollars to be able to have kind of the resources and the amount of people that would have needed to actually produce something like this. Like, if you look at like, you know, like a Marvel movie or something like that, and then you look at the credits and you see the like hundreds of people that need to be brought on to render all the different stuff and all the work that goes into something like that. So I definitely don't think there's any like room for people accusing them of being like lazy, or like you said, of like taking people's jobs. This sequence just wouldn't have happened if they hadn't attempted to try to do it using what they could with the AI. So I definitely think that I don't have like a moral issue with it. Like you said, I just think that there's like a question of like kind of whether the technology is like quite there yet. And like, I don't blame them for making an attempt and like going for it, because, especially when you are like up and coming studio, like this is their first like big project, sometimes you have to take big swings, and sometimes that's gonna work. And I bet that the scene still worked for some people, like you said, like until you saw that short from me, you didn't even realize it was AI. So I think, some people are going to notice it. Some people, they probably won't even notice it until, maybe they come across this conversation or see it in some other, someone else discussing it. So, I definitely don't think that there's room for like coming out like strong against them, but I know that there may be people who have different thoughts. If you're one of those people, definitely welcome your ideas. You can jump in the comments, let us know. I would love to hear kind of different perspectives on this. I was trying to think.
Just as somebody that does video production work, and like I say, this is coming from my job. That's been the last. I started like 30 years ago when it was just tape to tape editing. In my career, in my lifetime, it's been completely revolutionized by computers, and cameras are now on your phone that are good enough to take movie quality images. You have drone cameras, drones. You have handheld stabilizers that smooth out the stuff. These are all things that you used to have to pay thousands of dollars for, like to rent a helicopter for an afternoon to get an aerial shot. It's like, we're these drone cameras put out of work all these people that used to do helicopter videography, or the people that used to do Steadicam operators. I mean, I remember we paid $1,000 a day for 2 days for a Steadicam operator back in like 1999. These are all jobs that have been lost, but that's just part of the advance of technology. So that's one of the complaints that people have that I don't agree with, that jobs are being lost. That's just part of technology. That's going to happen. Innovations. It's going to open up opportunities for more people to do shows like this. The effects. This show wouldn't have been able to do it. This technology allows them to have some really wild, incredible looking sequences without having to spend $50 million.
Yeah, and in terms of like the actual like outcome of it, in some ways it kind of reminds me a little bit of like the era of like Phantom Menace, and like when CGI was like just starting to kind of be on the border of like sometimes it was like believable when it was with live action stuff, and sometimes it kind of really took you out of it. So I think that it seems like AI is kind of in a similar place to like late 90s or early 2000s just normal CGI with live action stuff. Like it's kind of difficult. It's like a little chancy. So I give them a thumbs up for taking that chance, even if I wasn't like 100% like wowed by the final result. Like my preference would have actually been to not like actually see the entire like Fall of Angels sequence, but just like I feel like they could have done something with like they have like kind of a cave, and there's different paintings of different angels and sequences.
Well, they actually did have that built in the show. Goliath was a painter, and he was painting this exact scene. I bet that's probably what they had initially like planned originally, before they decided to do this, because that could have worked just as well. You could have just seen these paintings kind of be animated out and kind of show, and that would have been pretty cool too.
Yeah, that would have been kind of where I would have kind of like tended for it. I feel like they could have had Goliath and his brothers be like children. So then like it would have been like a little bit more like Orpah, like story. kind of giving them story time, and that might have also kind of like really kind of hammered home like their kind of emotional connection to Orpah, setting up her eventual spoiler alert, her eventual death at the end of the episode. But overall, like I like that they they did the whole tale. I think that for what it was, like I think it was okay. Like it didn't bother me too much, but definitely interested to hear different reactions, because I know we're at this point where AI can be really divisive, both because of kind of the ethical considerations and job stuff, but also like just in terms of like how people receive it. Like some people, it sounds like didn't notice or just thought it was they liked it. other people, maybe were a little less into it. So yeah, I'm curious if you have any thoughts about either kind of just the topic of AI in general, or just specifically how well you think this sequence turned out. Definitely jump in the comments. Would love to interact with you a little bit on that. But I guess turning from the kind of the procedure, or the way that they actually did the scene, to the content of it. So Orpa's story that she tells, in kind of big picture, the story is related to Genesis 6, where in kind of the canonical Bible, it says that the sons of God took the daughters of men and took them as wives, and then afterward the Nephilim arose afterward. So that core of the story is in Scripture, but they add additional details, like talking about Shem Yaza, and talking about these sons of God, or these spirits, being called the Watchers. And there's kind of other aspects. Shem Yaza kind of encourages the angels with him to bind themselves to do this together. Like he's kind of leading them and wanting them all to jump on this bandwagon together. And some of those details are taken from the Book of Enoch, which, if you don't recognize that, it's because it's not in the canon of Scripture. Most churches do not accept the Book of Enoch as canonical or inspired. There's like a couple of small ones, like the Ethiopian Orthodox Church accepts it as inspired and part of their canon, and there's a couple other like little small ones like that do. But in general, most mainstream churches, Catholicism, and most like Protestant churches don't consider Enoch to be inspired scripture or in the canon. But a lot of Christian theologians and Jewish theologians as well have looked to Enoch as kind of a helpful writing. So not on the level of kind of inspired scripture or authoritative, but maybe on the level of kind of having some truth there, some things that it is illuminating. And if you actually look at the New Testament, the book of Jude specifically kind of alludes to Enoch's version of the fall of the sons of God, and First Peter does as well. So there's reason to believe that even some of the New Testament writers, even if they didn't necessarily think that Enoch was inspired, they were aware of it, and they were drawing on some of its ideas and thought that they were helpful. Yeah, I don't know, Victor, did you kind of, before this whole thing, like how kind of familiar were you with Enoch and some of the stuff that showed up in that story?
I mean, I was familiar with the book that it exists. I wasn't
Mhm.
familiar with the specific things that had to do with
Yeah.
with any of this. But I mean, but all the stuff that was in here, I heard somewhere. I just didn't know
Yep.
where it came from. And I did appreciate that, even within the show itself, they say, we don't know if this is true, or I
Yep.
forget how they worded it. They allude to it, but these are truths that these stories were told among the people. So
Yep.
it was something that is, it's like the show didn't make this up. The show
Yep.
is pulling from other traditions that
Mm-hmm.
did exist and acknowledge it. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to incorporate and bring all this stuff together and still keep everything separate, the Bible and uh, made up stuff,
Yep.
and separate from each other.
Yeah, like the show kind of creates like two levels of separation in a way, because first of all, it's Orpa who's telling the story, and so she's not like one of the good guys, not a faithful Israelite or anything. So she's kind of an unreliable narrator to begin with. And then second of all, like you said, like she kind of alludes to how like we don't know if this is myth or legend or something else. And so like there's definitely like an effort by the show to indicate like, these could be just kind of legendary things, but we're going to kind of share this as background. I think it's best to look at Enoch as kind of like a expansive interpretation of Genesis. In a lot of ways, Enoch is basically like House of David or The Chosen. It's like an adaptation of those older biblical stories. The writer is wanting to kind of imagine different details and get into some of the stuff that isn't explored in the original accounts. And so I've actually kind of pointed to the way that Jude and Peter look at Enoch, and they don't like condemn the writing of Enoch. They actually like draw on it in a positive way as kind of an argument for Bible adaptation in general. Because if Peter or Jude were really against people kind of doing a little bit of a expansive interpretation or adaptation on Bible stories, then I don't think that they probably would have been quoting from Enoch, or there's another one that they quote, the Ascension of Moses. And so, yeah, I think it's like an interesting thing to just be aware of. It's not like, I don't know if I would suggest if you, for most people to read through the whole thing. I've been listening through parts of it. It gets a little like kind of repetitive, or it kind of goes into like this whole journey that Enoch went on, and he's like describing like the skies, and there's some parts of it that are, because it's not scripture, I can say this, like that get a little boring. But some of the stuff that like the show hits on with like kind of his interpretation of the role of the Watchers after the fall of Adam and Eve. That stuff is a little bit interesting. If you're more like interested in learning about some of this stuff, I really recommend the work of Michael Heiser, the recently passed Michael Heiser. He was a professor of who studied a lot of different kind of biblical stuff, and who really focused on some of these dimensions of Enoch and like the story of the Watchers and things like that. So you can find, he's got a podcast. I mean, he doesn't still have it because he's dead, but you can still find it, the Naked Bible podcast. It's got a lot of good content, and he's got a book like Supernatural, and got some other books kind of related to all of this. So, yeah. Oh,
and just something else I've got to always like catch myself is that I'll remember stuff from like Paradise Lost. I have to remember, no, that's not.
Yep.
All of that stuff is like extra added stuff, but it's become so ingrained and used in so many pop culture. Any sort of angel type related thing draws on that to where it feels like it's almost equal weight to whatever the Bible might say about angels and Lucifer and all that. Even though I think Lucifer actually comes from Paradise Lost, the name.
The name is in it is in the Bible, but like whether it's actually referring to Satan or referring to like another figure, it's a little debated thing. I won't go back down that rabbit hole right now.
I think just in general, it's like there's going to be a lot of interesting extra biblical sources that we probably got in the back of our minds that I just like reading the book of Enoch, just kind of be aware that this may stick in your brain, and later on you may have to remember, it's like wait, did I read that in the Bible, or was that in the book of Enoch or Paradise Lost or the movie Constantine?
And that's like a reason for as you're watching through stories like that, this is definitely not a replacement for reading the Bible yourself. I think it's a really helpful, in one way you can kind of look at it as like a kind of a commentary on some of these biblical stories, but it's helpful to do both at the same time, so that you can both like see differences, but also like they'll help you kind of interpret each other in ways that are helpful. So I know that for some people this is kind of a challenging topic, but I don't think that the biblical writers would object, based on what I was saying, how they don't seem to have a problem with Enoch kind of expanding on Genesis, or the ascension of Moses, expanding on the death of Moses and Deuteronomy. So yeah, it's just something to be aware of, something to kind of examine yourself with. Even here, on this image, the angel has wings. We don't actually know for sure if kind of the typical angel would have had wings. We do know that a certain class of angel, the cherubim, definitely had wings, the seraphim too, but the kind of the standard angel, there's never actually wings that are mentioned in scripture itself. That's kind of a innovation that has come from various layers of biblical adaptation, different biblical paintings, and these ideas kind of get stuck in the kind of the general consciousness of our culture. And so if you ask the average person if angels have wings, they're like, oh, of course they have wings. And I don't blame the show for depicting the angels here with wings, because if they hadn't depicted the angels with wings, people would have been like, why don't the angels have wings? Or they might not have known that they were angels. They might be like, who are these, like humans falling from the sky? Just because for the average viewer, angels have wings. And so sometimes it's good to be aware of how sometimes adaptation, like future adaptations of the Bible, sometimes have to be influenced not only by the Bible itself, but by like other kind of depictions of the Bible, because they become so kind of infused in the culture that if you diverge from those, then people are going to be like really confused or like very upset, because they're going to assume that, oh, why are you not doing that thing that's in the Bible, even though it's actually not in the Bible. So yeah, kind of a interesting.
And the fact that the show presents it as all of these images and the story as from a non-biblical person, like what if Samuel would have told this story, that would have been a different sort of layer of authenticity put on it. So the fact that it's just somebody that has no connection to God is telling a story, they could have it all wrong. It's like it's just their interpretation of what they believe. So the story, the show's done a good job at keeping those two things separated.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely, like Orpah, her perspective on the story, she seems to be more sympathetic towards the fallen angels and definitely towards the giants. Like she's still on board for the whole like trying to be God thing, and trying to get her sons to be little gods on earth. That was like a interesting theme that they kind of explored, the idea of like created beings rebelling and trying to make themselves gods. So they introduced that through this whole sequence, with the angels being kind of the first ones to try to do that in their rebellion against the Most High. But then the giants trying to do that, and then even Akish seems to have a little bit of that kind of hubris or whatever. But most notably, like Saul. Samuel, claims that Saul is kind of making himself a god unto himself and violating the first commandment. We'll get into some of that stuff later, but that was like a really interesting theme that they introduced through this whole sequence. So I like that they did that with this bit. One other kind of bit of this that I wanted to get into is just the thought of how they are drawing on kind of this sense of like mythic story, and so part of how they create that sense of myth is by having this retold by Orpah. And if the story that she told, if it kind of like resonates with you, not just from like a I remember that this is kind of in the Bible, like Genesis 6, but if you also like are like, have I heard this story before, like outside the Bible, you might actually be thinking of like the story of Prometheus, maybe, because the part of the story of the Watchers is the idea of these god beings coming down, kind of binding themselves to humanity. And they didn't get into this in like a whole lot of detail, but part of what Enoch says is that they what they bring with them is not only do they produce the giant offspring, but they also bring kind of corrupting knowledge. So they bring like knowledge of like weapons and knowledge of astrology and knowledge of sorcery, and that whole idea of like divine beings coming down and bringing kind of forbidden knowledge to humanity is an idea that we get in a lot of other kind of myths throughout the world. So the most famous being the story of Prometheus, who is this god in Greek mythology, who he's portrayed in a positive light from the perspective of humans in Greek mythology, because he brings the knowledge of fire down to humans so that they can exist and have a more kind of tolerable existence, whereas kind of Zeus is trying to keep them down. So it's interesting because in kind of the broader kind of pagan culture, these godlike beings are portrayed in a positive sense. The knowledge that they are bringing is looked at as like kind of a boon to humanity, and these figures are seen as kind of saviors almost. And even if you look in kind of Near Eastern mythology, there's similar figures like I think they're called the Anunnaki, who are described as kind of bringing kind of this divine knowledge to humanity. But again, they're portrayed in a positive light. So one of the interesting things that the Bible does is that it takes these pagan myths and it kind of flips them on their head. So instead of looking at these spirits that are coming and bringing knowledge to humanity as saviors, it portrays them as corruptors of humanity, who are partially kind of responsible for kind of advancing kind of the destruction and corruption of the earth. But so, yeah, I don't know, Victor, do you have any thoughts on that before I keep going?
Just in general, Greek mythology, like half of the heroes are sons of the gods. Like Perseus is the son of Zeus. Hercules is the son of Zeus. They're the son of a human and a god. So that it pulls on that same imagery and that same tradition.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the idea of gods coming together with humans to produce kind of great warriors and heroes and kings or leaders. This is a very kind of pervasive idea in Greek mythology, Near Eastern mythology, Egyptian mythology. And so again, this is something that the Bible takes and kind of flips on its head. And, the heroes and the demigods are portrayed in a positive light in a lot of these pagan systems, but they're seen as destructive and potential threats through the kind of the biblical lens. But it's also interesting to kind of think about all of this from the light of how we think of kind of myth. So I was kind of made to think of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. They were friends, and before C.S. Lewis converted to Christianity, he was an atheist, but he really loved mythology. He found the stories just beautiful, and they really kind of stirred his emotions. But he, with his kind of intellectual mind, he looked at them and was like, I feel like kind of torn, because I love the beauty of these, but they're, I think they're completely false and just made up. And so what do I do with this kind of dichotomy within me? And one of the things that Tolkien did for C.S. Lewis in helping him kind of eventually move towards Christianity is that Tolkien explained that kind of all of these pagan myths were like kind of pointing towards a true myth. And that true myth is kind of found in Christianity. And so, and especially in the gospel, but in the Bible in general. And so I like how by kind of portraying some of these scenes and kind of tales that resonate with kind of pagan mythology and kind of fantasy and different things like that, the show is kind of connecting with people's kind of desire for or interest in kind of fantastic tales and myth, but it's showing them how all these tales that you see in Greek mythology or other different forms of mythology, there is some truth to them, but kind of you find their truest form in Scripture and in kind of and most ultimately in the story of Jesus, who is a son of God who descends to the earth to bring salvation to people, but does it in a very different way from these angelic sons of God and the giants that they produced. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Got it.
While we're on the topic of Tolkien, I just thought we'd also do a little sidebar because, yeah, I thought this episode had some interesting kind of Tolkien parallels. There's also some even bigger Tolkien parallels that are going to come out in episode 7, which I've had a chance to watch. And there's some scenes that are like almost like directly taken from Two Towers that I found interesting. Some people may be like, why are they copying Tolkien, or why are they copying the Two Towers? Or I guess in this case, they wouldn't be copying Tolkien because it's more the Peter Jackson trilogy that they are drawing on specifically. But I think that it's interesting what they're doing, and so I wanted to discuss it a little bit. So just to kind of go through, Victor, you can jump in here too if you have thoughts on like some different like kind of parallels between this show and Tolkien, and not like kind of just general things, which you're going to find in pretty much any like kind of epic tale or anything, right, but like more kind of like specific, like, oh, maybe this character seems to be kind of drawing on this character from Lord of the Rings, or this scene seems to be recalling that one. So in this episode, I really thought that Jonathan reminded me a lot of Faramir in a few different ways. So if you think like kind of big picture, so if you're not into Tolkien, let me just introduce you to a little bit. So Faramir is the son of the steward of Gondor. So Gondor is this kingdom, and its kings have been gone for a long time, but there are stewards who are ruling until the king's return. And over time, these stewards have come to just kind of look at it as them, like they've come to view themselves as kind of ruling instead of the king. But Faramir is this noble, unlike his father, is kind of just dedicated to being a steward, to not kind of holding on to power. And so eventually, when the king does return, Faramir is very receptive to him. He also kind of is very kind of just noble-hearted, resists temptation to try to like take power for himself. While on the other hand, like his father is kind of this corrupt figure who is kind of wanting to hold on to his power and authority. And if you think about that in comparison to Jonathan, Saul is kind of the true king when he comes onto the throne or whatever. But by this point in the story, Saul has been told that he's no longer king, right? God has taken his place of authority. Samuel's kind of been pretty explicit about that, don't keep holding on to something which was never truly yours. And yet Saul is, trying to grip onto that power and hold on to it, even though he knows that he's no longer the true king. Whereas Jonathan in the story, we've seen him kind of be very noble-hearted, like sticking for like what is right. Our house is ruled by God and not by us. And we know that he'll eventually be receptive to the true king that God kind of brings onto the picture. And then in this episode, we learn that Jonathan has kind of been tutored in his childhood by Samuel, who comes across very much like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, kind of this wizard who is himself very. Samuel, like Gandalf, is kind of a powerful figure with control over supernatural forces, and they both are kind of divine messengers, because Gandalf, he's not like just like a human who learned magic stuff. He was actually kind of like an angel, basically, who was sent from God to help out Middle Earth. So they're both kind of like messengers from God with supernatural powers. And both Jonathan and Faramir kind of look up to them, both in their childhood and even as their fathers oppose Samuel / Gandalf, Jonathan and Faramir continue to listen to them and be kind of open to them. So I don't know. I just thought it was like a interesting little parallel. Do you buy that, or am I stretching?
No, I think you nailed it. I guess you're going to come up with Theoden here in a second, another parallel. I'm guessing that I'll let you introduce that.
So those are my hints at the like 2 scenes in episode 7 that have like very close parallels to scenes in the Two Towers. So this scene here, if you remember in the Two Towers, there's this moment where as they're in Helm's Deep, this big castle, and kind of the opposing army has surrounded them, and everybody's kind of afraid, waiting for this army to attack. Aragorn, one of our main characters, he sees this boy kind of quaking and afraid, and he takes the boy's sword, he looks at it, he kind of waves it around, like checking it out, and he tells him, this is a good sword. And then he tells the boys, like, some of the men are saying, we won't live out the night. And Aragorn's like, there's always hope, or something like that. So there's a very close scene in episode 7 between Jonathan and a boy in the Israelite camp, which I definitely think is intentional. I don't think that they're like trying to get away with like stealing a scene. It's close enough that like, they're definitely like wanting us to notice. If you are like a Tolkien fan or a fan of the Peter Jackson films, then they're wanting us to see that connection and be like, oh yeah, this is just like that point in the Two Towers. There's also a scene between Saul and Abner, where Abner is getting Saul's armor on, which is very similar to a scene where Theoden, the king of Rohan, is having his armor put on by his second command, Gamling. And as that's happening, Gamling asks Theoden, Theoden asks Gamling, who am I? And same kind of thing happens with Saul and Abner. So yeah, why do you think the show is kind of being so intentional about not just kind of drawing on like archetypes, but actually kind of making these little allusions to the Lord of the Rings? Because I don't think that it's like an accident or just them being lazy. Like I think there's probably like a purpose to what they're doing.
Well, I mean, it's Lord of the Rings is the new shorthand for all kind of fantasy. I mean, that's the one touchstone probably everybody will know. And even then, it still kind of also harkens back to all the King Arthur stuff. There's Merlin, there's the King, there's a tradition of that. And I think Lord of the Rings is the most recent one. And it's also kind of, Obi-Wan and Luke too. There's that level of kings and these kind of things are just all in our minds.
Yep.
And that's just, it's not copying it. It's part of how tradition and traditionally these kind of stories are told. And that's just the most recent, really strong example of it that we've got.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think at one level, they're like wanting to evoke kind of specific feelings. And a lot of us have those feelings kind of associated with the Lord of the Rings films, or like you said, Star Wars films, Dune. And so by kind of putting these little Easter eggs or allusions within their own film, one kind of effect of that is that when we see that, it's going to kind of like ping that feeling that we already kind of associate with this sort of scene or this sort of character, and kind of connect. It connects their story to this, like you said, this kind of long line of stories going back beyond Lord of the Rings to, Arthurian tales, and beyond that to the actual original, Book of Samuel itself, which is in a way kind of a part of this whole line of tales. So I definitely think that's part of it.
Saul is actually Denethor from Gondor, and he's also Theoden because he's got the madness going that he needs to have that kind of being shaken out of, even though he doesn't quite ever get out of it.
That's a good point. I didn't think about the Gandalf kind of drawing the the madness out of Theoden. Yeah, but there is something there. That would be interesting to try to go through all the different bits and try to like find a parallel for that too.
Mhm.
Yeah, I also feel like maybe like one of the things that they're doing is with Tolkien. So Tolkien, he famously said that his stories, even though there's no like explicit religion, no one's praying to Jesus, no one is. Um, if you know kind of the Silmarillion and some of the other stuff, there is kind of a greater kind of monotheistic framework to all the stuff that's happening. But if you don't, you can read through the Lord of the Rings and you could easily kind of miss some of the theological implications of it. So I wonder if part of it is the show is also kind of almost providing us with like a commentary on Tolkien and
Mhm.
kind of saying like, hey, some of these things that you love in Tolkien, like this desire for hope that goes beyond kind of like in the face of extreme like difficulty and when you're outnumbered or whatever. And some of the other kind of important themes that we find in Tolkien, all this stuff that you love in Tolkien, it's actually originally from the Bible, and it finds its kind of ultimate grounding in God Himself. So I wonder if like that's a move that they're wanting some of the viewers to make, especially either people who are watching and are not Christians, or people who maybe are watching like younger Christians who haven't kind of made some of these connections and don't realize like, oh, I love Tolkien, and that connects back to my faith as well. Like this is not just some other kind of thing that's freestanding, all these kind
Mhm.
of fantasy tropes and themes, but actually it derives itself from Scripture itself, and it points me to God.
Well, the
Uh,
main people behind the show are explicitly Christians. They're not
yeah,
just Jewish people believing in the Jewish faith, but they're Christians.
yeah,
So this is an opportunity that we've never had where this kind of story can be really grounded in more Christian ideas, or
yeah,
those kind of like the same thing that Lord of the Rings draws on.
yeah,
It's like it's able to tie it together in a way that we've never had that tied together before.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I'm curious if I ever get a chance to talk to John, or when I might want to ask him a little bit more about kind of his perspective on why he's making some of these connections, because I definitely think there's a method to it. I don't think it's just like cheap, like, oh, we're going to copy and paste this. So, because
Mhm.
it'll make us popular, or,
I think it's just reclaiming Christianity for Tolkien.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Which, and I
Everybody
think
always
Tolkien would,
knows about Narnia. That's
yeah,
always been there. It's always kind of like pushed off to the side that Tolkien, Middle Earth is sort of very heavily Christian
yeah.
overlay to it.
Yeah, and I think Tolkien would approve. I think he would, he like Tolkien had some reservations about Narnia because of kind of like the kind of the strange mix of how Lewis kind of made his stuff. But I think Tolkien would approve of
Mhm.
doing a rendition of a biblical story that really kind of speaks to these same themes that he himself loved. So.
Ironically, this show is a lot more faithful to Tolkien than Rings of Power is.
Mm, that's interesting. Yeah, I won't get into a debate on Rings of Power, but yeah, that is interesting. Some of the themes and stuff
Mhm.
that's present here. You can definitely tell that the creators of the show love Tolkien a lot. I don't think that they'd be doing all this stuff unless they did.
Yep.
Okay, we'll probably take a little bit less time on some of these other storylines and topics, just because we riffed a little bit there, but that's okay. Any other stuff kind of on this broader storyline between Akish? He's trying to finalize kind of Goliath being on his side. He brings Goliath and Orpah to Gath. He wines and dines them, and he's boasting about uh, the luxurious royal lifestyle that they're going to have. And Orpa's basically like, yeah, you're going to have to actually just give up your throne entirely and make Goliath king in your place, because he should be a god. And so, just having like some luxuries isn't going to be enough for him. And then eventually, Achish recruits Doeg to assassinate Orpah and make it look like it was the Israelites so that he can get Goliath on his side and kind of motivated by the same desire for revenge. What'd you think of that whole storyline?
Yeah, like the whole like how did Goliath get with the Philistines? That was not something I ever really thought about.
Yeah.
He was just always there, and I thought this was really, really fun, really Lord of the Rings fantasy storytelling way of putting him, giving him a backstory and justifying why they have this giant. That's like, does everybody have a giant? It's like, no, this is a one-time kind of thing that makes sense for this particular story, why he was there at this time. So I thought it was really well told.
The Philistines weren't kind of native to the land of Israel, so they were sea peoples who came kind of from Greece and eventually kind of inhabited the land. And so it makes sense that they probably didn't have the giants themselves, if we assume that Goliath is descended from the same giants that the Israelites faced when they first kind of entered into the land under Joshua, because those would have been related to people who were actually from the land. And so I thought it was a really creative way for them to explain how the Philistines got this giant on their side, how he was connected to them, but also kind of connected to some of these past figures that the Israelites have faced. And like you said, I love kind of how they played on some kind of typical tropes, but tropes that exist for a reason, because I think they speak to true things, of how villains are constantly backstabbing each other, and that's kind of part of the essence of villainy, right? They don't, villains don't play well together because they're selfish and just out for power and willing to stab each other in the back. And so I like that they did that, while at the same time like humanizing Goliath a little bit, giving us insight into his love for his mother, even if she's corrupt, and we're not like a fan of the family. We can at least see a little bit of where he's coming from and empathize with him a little bit, even if we're not like totally on his side. So
it's going to make it a little bit of a tragedy. Spoiler alert when David takes him out.
I'm surprised actually that they have so we discussed a little bit Goliath's mother. Her name is Orpah, which if you have read the Bible, the only place that comes up is in the book of Ruth. But later rabbis developed this idea that Orpah, who is Ruth, who eventually is David's grandmother, great grandmother, she's married to a man, and that man has a brother, and his brother is married to Orpah. And when both the brothers die, Ruth goes with the mother-in-law, Naomi, back to Israel, where she eventually meets Boaz and becomes part of David's family line. But Orpah, we're told that, she goes back to her people and her gods and all of that. And eventually the rabbis, they came up with this kind of legend or this tradition that Orpah went on to become the father of Goliath and his three other giant brothers. And so the show's kind of drawing on that Jewish tradition about Orpah. But because of that, there's almost like this sense of like David and Goliath not exactly being cousins, because we're not told necessarily that Orpah and Ruth were sisters, but they're kind of sisters-in-law, at least for a little bit. So that almost makes Goliath and David like parallel figures. So I wish actually we'd gotten like a little more explicit if that is like kind of what they're going for, but it's a cool idea that like that's out there at least, regardless. So but
something else I liked is how the show asks and answers the question of like, well, why isn't Goliath the king? If he's this guy, how is he not telling everybody else what to do? And it gives a really good explanation about how he is a soldier and not the king of this group of people.
Like he's kind of been manipulated into the situation, and at this point he's just kind of driven by vengeance. And I like also how I already brought up how the this episode kind of hammers home this idea of like the Goliath and the giants kind of seeing themselves as little gods on the earth, rebelling against the true God. Yeah, that kind of sets up for Goliath's kind of his big clash with David, that it is like a clash between like gods, the true God, and then Goliath, this like hubristic, semi-human who is kind of aspiring to be a god or whatever. So I liked how they set that up too.
Yeah, like even if Goliath was a little G god, he's
Yeah.
still going to be taken down by big G god.
Big G god. Yeah.
Now, here's a question I've got for you that maybe I don't know if you've done any research on, but it's like Goliath's sword.
Mm-hmm.
It looks almost like the sword that whoever the angel or whoever it was that was in David's vision in the water. Is that the same sword? It looks the same.
So I've heard someone else mention that too. Yeah, they do look similar. So there's a couple different ways that you could interpret that. So I mean, David eventually takes Goliath's sword. So in a way that could be kind of hinting at this idea of how God kind of disarms the enemy and ultimately ends up using the enemy's weapons against him. Yeah, that could kind of be a little bit of a allusion to that. I mean, in theory, if you believe that the angel is not just like an angel, but actually kind of a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus, who is the son of David, then kind of it makes sense that he has this sword, because it's almost like it will eventually become an heirloom for Jesus, even though Jesus doesn't actually get the sword, but it makes sense that like they're kind of visually connecting them. Yeah, I don't know. So I don't think that it's.
Just wondering.
I think it's more of like a symbolic thing. I don't think that, like I saw someone suggest that the person that David is seeing the vision is himself. I don't think that's the case. I definitely think that this is the commander of the Lord's hosts. Yeah, that'll actually be even more explicit. Spoiler as we go along. And so, yeah, I think that it's more of like probably a kind of thematic idea that, that he, the little gods are ultimately disarmed and their weapons are used against them. Yeah. Let's move on just because we're already, we don't have to talk too much on Doeg. I guess, I'm curious what they're going to do with him, just because I was surprised by, like, Akish seems to like recognize him when he shows up, and he seems to have some sort of kind of larger scheme. Like it would have made more sense to me, I guess, if the show had been explicit and made it clear that Doeg is like a spy for the Philistines, working on the inside of Saul's kingdom. But that wasn't like totally clear to me. So I don't know exactly what to make of Doeg and kind of what he's after and what he's doing. Do you have any thoughts? I'm curious.
It feels like he's kind of an opportunist that just goes around and has information that makes him momentarily valuable, and so he's allowed to get into these different kind of situations or areas to where he can be influential.
Yeah. Okay. That does make sense. They have made him kind of this almost like Gollum like character, because Gollum is famously like always wanting like hidden knowledge and stuff. And the idea that he's kind of opportunistic with that and will kind of get knowledge where he can get it and share it with whoever he thinks that it will be like valuable. That makes sense.
His little scene, with Reuben, the little boy, was really telling too, because it kind of shows his ability to frame the stuff that he's doing in a very positive looking thing. Like he's had Reuben like, hey, this sounds pretty cool. I would like to see a
Mm,
beating heart in my hand, you know. So he's got a very smooth tongue. He's kind of like a
yeah,
worm tongue in a way too.
yeah, yeah. That's
Another
true.
Tolkien reference.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm definitely interested in what they do with Doeg. Like I like the character in general. Like I kind of wish that we had like a little bit more of a sense of like I know that we know like at like an abstract level that he says he's like a servant of power. He's just out for power and for advancing his own self and his own agenda. But I'd like to have like a little bit of a sense of like yeah why he does what he does. But yeah, I'm sure we'll
He's
eventually
just
get
really
some more.
creepy, and he's doing a good job at being creepy. And
Yeah, no,
to
he
me,
does
it
a
feels like
the acting does a great job.
that's what his character is. And I don't know if, like I say, I'm hoping we get a little bit more justification for
Hmm.
why he's doing this and why, what's in it for him besides
Yeah,
just
yeah,
getting to have more bodies to mess with.
yeah. But yeah, the actor, like I love his like performance and yeah, just kind of what they've done with like the tone of the character. Yeah, making him kind of this like mad scientist also
Hmm.
really interesting. Yeah, David and Saul also have some really interesting scenes, like painfully ironic scenes where Saul is telling David like he can do anything and don't let anyone kind of hold you back from the destiny that just hold on to it tight. Which yeah, I thought that um, that moment and then the moment where it seems like Saul is talking to David and he's like telling him like, I know you're going to be king after me, and he's giving him advice, and then David suddenly realizes that Saul's actually not thinking that it's David. Saul, in kind of his madness or whatever, is thinking that he's talking to Jonathan, and
Hmm.
so there's an irony that David was thinking that he like Saul was like confiding in him and was on board with him, and then suddenly he realizes actually the opposite is the fact. Like Saul is like doubling down on his kind of his intent of having Jonathan as the king that succeeds after him. So I thought those two moments were like beautifully done. Yeah, so many different kind of levels of what was going on in the exchange between them. Yeah, I just want to uh, kind of draw attention to that. Yeah, really
Hmm.
interesting.
So one of my pet peeves in watching movies is when people are supposed to be crazy or, you know, like kind of like this here. But I think Ali Suleiman is like doing the best crazy person I've ever seen on
Yeah,
film, because I
yeah,
buy it 100% when he makes that shift from anytime he shifts from normal to, he's full on seeing things and then back. I mean, you can see it on his face and in his eyes. It all resonates, and
yeah.
to me, that's like the hardest thing that this show is going to have to do, is
Mm,
try to convince me that that this person would be somebody that people would still try to follow,
yeah,
even when he's clearly going nuts. And I believe it. It's like I believe
yeah,
all the people still care for him, they still revere him, and they still want to see him succeed, and
yeah,
they're going to do what they can to do that. And I believe that because of his performance.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I love that they are giving us reason to understand like David's loyalty to Saul, because you know after Saul starts like throwing spears at him and chasing him into the wilderness, you would think that David would just want to be like, oh, I'm God's anointed. I'm gonna kill this sinner and take my place. But I love that they're really doing a good job of kind of establishing David's connection to him, and the sense of Saul as kind of a mentor or a father figure for him. And yeah, I love the scenes between them. I think
Mm-hmm.
those were maybe some of my favorite moments in the entire episode, because um,
Yeah.
we really have to buy their connection, especially like yeah, those when we get to the famous scene where David has a chance to kill Saul and he doesn't, and then afterward he confronts Saul, and there's just this really emotional exchange that they have, where Saul, refers to David, like he says, "Is that you, my son David?" And so we really have to buy both that David has this loyalty to Saul, but also that Saul looks on David almost as a son. So I love that they've been setting that up well.
Yep.
Yeah. Then also with David, there's kind of his ongoing kind of relational drama with Michal. Also like to talk a little bit about Mirab, and your thoughts on his encounter with her. Let's start with that actually. When kind of Mirab meets with David as he's kind of leaving Gibeah, because he's tried to help Saul, and it's become apparent that Saul's madness is not going away, and there's just more chaos that's happening. David finally decides he needs to leave. Before he leaves, Michal comes and she stops him, and kind of on the surface level, in terms of like what she says to him, it seems like she's just coming for Michal as Michal's messenger, and wanting to see if David has any kind of final words that he wants her to offer back to Michal. But yeah, I didn't know what to make of kind of her, like the subtext, like the way that she kind of touches his hand, and like the voice that she uses. Did you read into that as like her having some attraction to him, or
I looked at it more as she could tell that there's a connection between Michal and David, and
yeah,
she was just denied happiness,
okay,
happy marriage previously, and I
yeah,
could see this maybe as like a sort of a jealous, sort of like, I'm gonna, this is a forbidden love that Mikhail's not allowed to have, so
yeah,
I'm just gonna maybe try to stop that. And we also know that at some point, I don't know if how they're going to do it in the show, but I can see that this could be a way that she convinces Saul to say, "Hey, let me be the prize for David instead of McCall."
yeah,
And that could be how that, because like it doesn't seem like there'd be any reason why David would be like, "Yeah, I'm on board with Marab," when McCall is right there. But I could see that
yeah,
where she could worm her way into saying, "Let me be the prize."
okay,
Just to kind of maybe even just kind of get at her, to try to, as a rivalry, because Carl always seems to get what she wants. It seems like
yeah,
she's the bitter sister that's not ever given, she calls the apple of her father's eye. So
yeah. So you think that there is like a little bit of like it almost felt to me like maybe like kind of like a vicarious, like, oh, I've seen the love that they have, that he has for her and she has for him, and like, yeah, um almost like as she kind of is like caught between that, she almost like catches feelings, or like has like kind of that envy for, um like she wishes she could kind of experience that for herself almost. Is that kind of what
could
you're
be. I mean,
thinking?
yeah, it's something. There's something clearly going on. It wasn't just
Yeah,
a happenstance they put it in there,
yeah,
And she went there of her own volition. That was her
yeah,
own idea, her own plan. So she had some kind of plan. She wasn't doing it for McCall's sake.
yeah,
I don't think so. She
yeah,
wasn't
and
doing it
like,
to help her out. So
yeah, if she was just doing it like purely, um like at the kind of the level of the things that she says, kind of surface level, yeah, I don't, the fact that they have her kind of touch him in the way that she does, like, that just kind of sends to me signals of like, yeah, that there's a little more going on there, because I'm not saying that every time a girl touches a guy that there's like, attraction going on, but within film, like, I don't know, I feel like that's something that you show to
yeah,
communicate a specific sense of like, desire, or yeah, something like
yeah.
that.
And
So
David wasn't having anything of it. So it wasn't coming
yeah,
from him.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
So
that's just an
curious.
interesting thing. Well, I definitely agree with you. I think that it's probably setting up the fact that Mirab will be the one who's offered first. And so, yeah, maybe she does have a little bit of envy, or is like starting to like want that for herself. And so maybe she like, yeah, maybe she'll find a way to kind of outmaneuver McCall and try to ask for David for herself. But then, there'll be some sort of kind of storyline where, either like Saul, gets pushed to do something else with her, or, some drama between the sisters. So that's just like an interesting thing to anticipate in season 2. They're probably just kind of giving us the slightest hint of that to look forward to. Yeah, and then in terms of like David and McCall, there's kind of a theme that they've been developing with the two characters. This kind of tension between like duty versus like identity and purpose. David has this sense of like, or like also like destiny. So like David kind of doesn't feel as bound by kind of like this is kind of my social, like socially prescribed destiny, and this is what's going to happen, and I have to stick with it. Like he's open to the idea of like, let's run away together and we can just live simple lives. Whereas McCall, even though she loves David, she has this sense of like, I can't run away from my role as a princess. Like I've got to do certain things, and that means that you and me are not going to be able to potentially be together. And obviously, eventually, God's going to kind of open a door up so that those two things can reconcile. But yeah, it's been a kind of an interesting. I like their relationship. I like kind of the tension that they're having to navigate together. So, I don't know.
It's just kind of interesting, just knowing where this goes, how they're going to reconcile where we are now with how it ends up.
Yeah,
it doesn't seem like it can really line up, at least emotionally. It seems like there's a lot more emotion going on between the characters than how it plays out ultimately. So I'd be curious to see how they handle that.
Yeah. So for anyone who isn't like super aware of the book of Samuel, so eventually after David goes, so David and McCall eventually marry after David proves himself in battle. But then after Saul turns on David, David has to go on the run, but McCall gets left in the house of Saul. And Saul eventually marries off McCall to some other guy, even though she's married to David. So it's a bad thing that he's doing that. But the guy that she gets married off to, he actually apparently kind of like deeply loves her. And so later, after David ascends to power, after Saul dies, he asks for Michal back from Eshbal, who takes over in Saul's place. And Eshbal sends her to David, but the former, or like the other husband of Michal is like kind of following after her, weeping because he loves her so much. And then when Michal rejoins kind of David's harem, because he's got multiple wives now, there's kind of this confrontation that they have after the famous scene of David dancing either in the nude or in an ephod, depending on how you interpret what's going on. And Michal is kind of like denigrating what he did. And then the Bible tells us that after that, she remained married to him, but she never had kids. Like David apparently stopped sleeping with her. And so, there's going to be some turbulent times ahead of the two of them. So I agree with you. It's going to be interesting. Like they're going to have to, really kind of do a lot to break down this relationship. It'll be kind of tragic to see after like all the investment that they've put into their connection.
I wonder if there's any way that Joab could be the person that, at least within the version of this show, because he obviously has a thing for Michal.
So I don't think he could be
what
the
are they
one
going to do with that?
Yeah, I don't think he could be the one that she gets given to by Saul, because Joab will be with David and his men. But I could see him coming in later after David and Michal kind of functionally separate. Like, maybe, that kind of reintroduces this whole love triangle with Joab. And like, I'm curious whether, like, as Joab is kind of also kind of asserting himself and his power later in David's reign, whether that could kind of be related to that potential like love triangle. Maybe there's, him and Michal end up having more of a relationship as she's distanced from David. I don't know. That's pure speculation, but that's
Right.
at least what I would do based on what they've done so far. We don't have to get too much into Ahinoam and Saul. Only like, kind of Ahinoam, she's brought on her witch Besai to do the sorcery, and the sorcery isn't doing enough, so she does even more dangerous sorcery, which involves taking some of Saul's blood and mixing it with a potion, and then pouring a little bit into his mouth, and then like having it kind of underneath him so he can kind of smell the fumes. And I thought that was interesting in that one of the initial problems to begin with is that Saul didn't kill the blood drinkers, the Amalekites, or at least he didn't kill Agag. And am I right? Like he drinks some of the potion from her, right? He isn't just okay.
Yeah, she pours it in his mouth.
Yeah. And so effectively, like he's become a blood drinker, just like the people that God had called him to annihilate. So I thought that was like an interesting little touch. That stuff isn't in the Bible, definitely. A lot of this stuff with Besai's invented, but I think it's like an interesting way of them showing how like Saul has gone from being this person that God commissioned to destroy kind of these pagan nations and their corrupt practices, to eventually becoming someone who is using the same practices himself in opposition to God, or in effort to kind of stand up after God has kind of given him over. I thought that was just like an interesting little.
It makes me think that like the show's kind of presenting him, unless I'm misremembering it, but it's kind of presenting him as unwittingly being having all these witch things instead of it being more him seeking it out. Is what it seems like.
That's true.
That's
true.
Was more saying.
It's more Ahinoam who is kind of driving the bus on that. So she's, but I look at her as kind of representing kind of his more ambitious side a little bit. So she is kind of steering him towards that kind of towards some of those practices. And he is allowing himself, I guess, to be kind of manipulated in that way. And then we already hit a little bit on Jonathan and Samuel. I was comparing him to Faramir. We get, so Jonathan, he's worried about Saul's deterioration. He realizes that it has something to do with Samuel. So he somehow he knows that Samuel's in Sinai. That's a little thing that I ding the episode for, because it felt like a little like hand wavy that Jonathan knew, but it's fine. So he travels down to Sinai, and as he's kind of ascending the mountain, he has visions of his death, just like his father did. And then he finally gets to ask Samuel, like, what happened? Like, are you anointing someone to replace my father? And Samuel reveals that that Saul has kind of put himself in the place of God and is actively rebelling, and is being replaced by someone else. What did you think of kind of the Jonathan Samuel bit?
Outside of the convenience of all of Israel, that he could find this needle in a haystack, he went right to it. Outside of that, I loved the scene. I thought it was the old man strength that he said that he was able to defeat Jonathan with. I bought that, especially from Stephen Lang. He projects strength even at this age. And just like in the turn, it's like whenever it's like, "Hey, it's Saul, it's me, Jonathan. Hey,
Yeah.
sorry," and pushing him down on his face to get up. I thought that was all a really fun overall scene, but just segued into very powerful.
Yeah.
Jonathan having to he was asked this question, and it's kind of like a parallel to Abner's having the same question asked to him.
Mm.
Who do you serve?
Yep.
I serve the house of Saul. Where you have the
Mm.
son of Saul is not even doing that.
Mm.
He's serving God. So nice parallel.
Oh, good catch on that.
And it just kind of shows the heart of Jonathan.
Yeah.
And it's gonna make it even more, I guess, tragic in a way when he realizes that the person that has been anointed is going to be his friend. I'm curious how far into their friendship
Mm.
that revelation is made.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I won't. Yeah, I'll try to hold back on spoilers,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I agree. I actually, while I'm making Lord of the Rings comparisons, I think the strength that they gave to Samuel, and then also kind of that switch he has between like a little bit of like kind of wry humor, but also like being able to be very serious. Also very Gandalf for me. I mean, not exactly, but just a little touch of
Mm-hmm.
Gandalf, having some of that wry humor himself too, and obviously being strong. Yeah, but I like how they establish kind of this connection between Samuel and Jonathan. Samuel, it becomes apparent that he's kind of been like this mentor figure, yeah, and that he is able to kind of challenge Jonathan, and yeah, like kind of give him these hard truths. Um, yeah, I feel like the show is. Yeah, I feel like it's gonna speak to like young men. I feel like in kind of giving kind of some really kind of robust figures, especially kind of in this season where the world is providing a lot of like negative kind of masculine people to look up to that Christian men should not be looking up to. I like how they have some of these really powerful father son kind of relationships like Jonathan and Samuel, or some friendships as well, where there's kind of challenge that's happening, but also kind of this clear sense of love and devotion, and these are some of the
Mm-hmm.
themes that have always spoken to me from the book of Samuel itself. So I love to see how they're kind of bringing those onto the screen, even though like Samuel doesn't talk a lot about Jonathan and Samuel, but it makes sense that they would have kind of this close relationship. So I love
Well,
that.
just to your point, modern masculinity kind of frowns upon anything soft
Yeah.
or loving, but you got David, who was a singer,
Yep.
musician. That was why he even was in the court in the first place. So there's just a lot of things about him that he's a poet. He cries a lot. He dances.
Yep.
He's in touch with
Yep.
his more emotional side, and he's probably the coolest masculine figure that there is. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
he had a friend that was his best friend that was like almost closer to him than his
Yep.
own family. Like there's so many examples of what masculinity should look like. It shouldn't be
Yep.
frowned upon,
Yep.
especially in today's society. So
Yeah. I really hope that like I know churches have had a lot of success in using the Chosen to do kind of Bible studies and stuff like that, and I think that those have had broad success, with a variety of different age groups. I definitely have heard of a lot of success with Gen Z and younger people as well. But I do wonder whether House of David would be kind of particularly useful for churches that are wanting to kind of reach their young men, and kind of providing them with some figures and some situations that, while biblical, will also kind of speak to them in a unique way. So eventually I want to get around to doing some Bible study resources for churches based on the show, because I definitely think that there's depth here. It's not just spectacle and action sequences. There's some deep themes. There's some beautiful relationships. There's a lot to learn and to follow. So yeah, I definitely hope that churches are using it, or at the very least that some of the people that are watching it are gaining kind of the fullness of what is being presented to them. And I think that's it for stuff that we're gonna hit. So thanks so much for everyone who's joined us. It's been a lot of fun digging into episode 6. Next week we'll probably hit on episode 7, but The Chosen season 5 will also be out. So we'll probably be hitting both episode 7 of House of David, but we'll probably do that kind of quick, and then also move on to Chosen season 5, because there's just so much good content out there. So I have my my reviews for the next couple episodes. I've kind of been working on them in advance so that I can have those set while I'm also working on the stuff for The Chosen. So great season to be alive and to be a fan of Bible-based shows and things like that. Thanks for joining us, though. Again, check out The Bible Artist, or throw me a few bucks on Buy Me a Coffee. And hope that you join us again next week. Oh, also, Victor has a novel. Do you want to share about it?
Sure. Just real quick. It's called The Sojourners. It's I'm putting it free online on my Substack, vicdigital.substack.com. Put out a chapter or so every week for free, and it's about it's a Christian fantasy novel. I kind of describe it as Game of Thrones meets Narnia meets the Acts of the Apostles. So if that's any of those topics interest you, I would say give it a look, and I would be honored.
Oh, Christy says that's pretty cool. So definitely hope you check that out, Christy. It's a lot of fun. And
link in the bio.
Yep, link in the description below. If you've liked House of David, it's got a lot of the kind of those kind of epic fantasy vibes and stuff. And some of the kind of world building as well. So but that's it for tonight. Thanks everybody for joining us, and Godspeed.